Okay, jumping into Genesis 25 real quick, we're going to look through kind of a bullet point chapter almost, where it covers Abraham's death, covers his burial, Isaac's wedding, and then the birth of the twins and the fallout of that in their early years. So it's kind of an interesting sort of skips through some time frames. So let's jump into it real quick. We begin with kind of a startling info dump, I guess, that Abraham took another wife named Keturah, had multiple sons with her. And a lot of scholars would kind of wonder, well, where does that land? Is it after Sarah was dead? Was it when they weren't having kids at all early on? And these nations have arisen around them in the aftermath? Kind of tricky because he was alive for another 30 to 40 years after Sarah passed. And possible, not really very clear from the passage, if it's sort of a retrospect, dump a little information in, give some nuggets, clarify where these other nations came from. And possibly that's all there is to it. There is one nugget in there, though, that it says in verse 5, Abraham gave all that he had to Isaac. He gave gifts to these sons of the concubines and these other people, but all that he owned, all that he had was going to Isaac. And of course, Isaac was the son of promise. And in Isaac, all these things would be fulfilled. But was Abraham's perspective of it. So Isaac was the rightful heir to all the things from the promise given to Abraham. And Isaac, then we see an interesting nugget that Abraham died at a good old age, full of years. He was 175 years old. Now, this is when the generations are beginning to shorten. Because if you look back in chapter, what was it, chapter 11? When we're introduced to Abraham, even chapter 12, his father died at 250, 205. So, kind of interesting. Each generation is getting a little bit shorter and shorter as time is going. But a nugget of verse 9 there, Isaac and Ishmael together buried Abraham. They buried their father. So this is kind of putting to rest the old rivalry. Isaac is at least 40, 45, 50, some question as to how old he is. But he and Ishmael have quite possibly kind of put the past behind them. We have Ishmael's genealogy and the descendants and the nations that came from him, and a lot of them are tribes of Africa, and they were concurrent later on mentioned in Scripture. And then we're introduced in verse 20. Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah. So if you think back to chapter 24, he's in the field at 39 years old, 40 years old, and that's when they meet and get married. And then another 20 years goes by, and he's pleading there in verse 21, pleading with the Lord because his wife Rebekah is barren, just like Sarah was barren. So this becomes another miracle birth according to the Lord. And then there are twins. So Rebekah gives birth to twins. She's told by the Lord that there are two nations in your belly, two peoples. One will be stronger, the younger will rule the older. So this is a hint at the conflict that's coming, because that ancient culture, the older always had primary rights, always had primary authority and preference, and this older. So this is being flipped upside down with these twins, and we'll see at birth. You'll be introduced to Esau. Esau is very hairy. He says he was red. He's very hairy, so they named him Hairy. In Hebrew, hairy is Esau. And then right behind him, even as he's leaving the womb, there's a hand that reaches out and grabs his foot, and that's the introduction to Jacob. Little brother Jacob, the heel catcher, is what Jacob means, or usurper. And in the process of time, even within this chapter, we see elements of that where Isaac is out in the field hunting. Isaac is the favorite of, or Esau's out in the field hunting. He's the favorite of Isaac. Jacob is the favorite of Rebekah. Jacob makes some stew. Esau comes in and counts the birthright of being the oldest as a worthless thing for a pot of stew. He trades it, and Jacob kind of pulls off this stunt where he gains the advantage. And what is the birthright? In our culture, we don't really know necessarily what that birthright means. But in that day, the birthright would mean all of the honors, the wealth, the acquisition, and the rightful standing would belong to Jacob now. And so it's kind of the beginning of trouble brewing between them. It's just a foreshadow of what's coming down the road between Isaac, Rebekah, Jacob, Esau. There's this rivalry within the family. The parents are preferring one over another, and the boys have this instant struggle even from the womb. So great chapter to begin to introduce yourself to Jacob and the challenges of Jacob and Esau.